Hello there, welcome to lesson 4. We are going to talk about the mounts on the hand and the fingers. In this lesson, we are going to be talking about all the mounts. They go right through from Jupiter to Uranus, obviously named after the planets. The mounts and fingers. The mounts are the raised padded areas on the palm. The ones located under the fingers are named after that particular finger, with the exception of the thumb. Sometimes these mounts are not found directly below and in the center of the finger. This is called a displaced mount. When this occurs, the qualities from one mount are being shared with the other. So the fingers that relate to those mounts share similar qualities. Often a well-developed mount will also display a well-developed finger, such as here we have the Jupiter finger and the Jupiter mount. If you notice, it's quite a thick finger compared to the others. So the meanings of these mounts. If the mount appears to be flat, it can indicate that the person does not put much energy into that part of their life. So we'll go into the detail on each mount further on. So a large, well-developed mount would suggest the opposite, where there's a lot of focus directed to that area. But as a common rule, if the hand has large mounts all over, the person will have high energy levels with enthusiasm for life. So if the hand mostly consists of flat mounts instead, there's less zest for life, not much energy. So with all of these meanings, we'll go through Pluto, Moon, outer Mars. We'll go through the meanings of them all in the next few slides and describing them all. Markings on the mount. Sometimes there's marks on the mount such as lines, crosses, circles, zigzags. There's all sorts of marks on people's hands sometimes, so that will affect the area described. Often it heightens the qualities of the mount. It shows potentially an overuse of that particular matter. Some specific markings can be positive and depending on what the mount represents, and some can be negative. For instance, if the Mercury mount has many lines, it shows that that person is likely using that area. And that area, just going back to the previous page, Mercury is for communication. We will in other lessons be discussing all the markings on the mounts as well. Now the Jupiter mount. The Jupiter finger and mount represent the self-confidence, religion, the strengths and weaknesses of the character, and if it shares the space partially beneath the Saturn finger, there will be hands-on ability to achieve goals. So it stands for idealism, wealth and success, glory and honors, charisma, ambition and leadership, practicality, and how you deal with others and yourself, your pride. So this area is well developed. You are most likely to succeed. You will have a charismatic personality, you will have ambition, and you have qualities of leadership, especially if the finger is also well developed. It does talk about your self-esteem and ego as well. So a well-developed Jupiter mount and finger shows someone who has high self-esteem. The Saturn finger and mount. Whenever I see the Saturn mount very large, it's quite rare. The Saturn finger and mount represent your boundaries. It's balancing force of the psyche, aiding rational thought. It's thought that it is the symbol of the elderly, grandparents, and wise men. So a large mount here can reveal pessimism or someone with many responsibilities. The person I know with a very large mount of Saturn, that person had a lot of responsibilities. He was looking after his wife, his family, and obviously himself as well. So he was very into life. So a lot of his mounts were developed. So positive aspects show an organized and dependable person. Saturn refers to responsibilities, the law and self-discipline, wisdom, solitude, maturity and sensibility, and work ethics. So with the Saturn finger, if this finger is not very long, if it's short or thin or weak, and if the mount is the same, it can show a lack of those. But rarely is this mount large, like I said before. So Saturn is very serious in nature. Apollo. The Apollo aspects of Apollo show a versatile and adaptable person. Negative aspects point to potentially gambling or paying too much attention to appearances. So when we talk about Apollo, we not only talk about this mount, we talk about the Apollo finger as well. If the mount of Apollo is displaced towards the mount of Saturn, between the two fingers, much like this, the creative side of the personality is taken seriously because it's going towards the serious side of the Saturn. So the Apollo is not so serious. Apollo is the more fun-loving, creative, and the Saturn is the serious, law-abiding. So people with this kind of mount, such as this photo here, they do have a serious side to their personality. And often they will have a loop of seriousness, which is a loop that is formed here in the skin ridges between the two fingers. That is something that I will talk about in Destiny Palmistry 2, of course, more about the lines. Okay, so let's get on with it. So an underdeveloped finger, say if this finger was thin or short and underdeveloped, the flat mount here would show introvert qualities. This person wouldn't be very outgoing. This finger is the social finger and the creativeness. So if that's weak, they will be quite introverted. So the Apollo finger and mount, what do they represent? They represent creativeness and artistic ability, self-expression and outward appearances, your sense of style, how you like to dress and things like that. People with a large mount tend to always want to look good. So it also refers to your relationships and your social life. Like I said before, if that area is weak, the person is quite introverted. And stands for warmth and loyalty. Stands for happiness and luck. Okay. Moving along to the next mount, we have Mercury. That is the Mercury finger and Mercury mount. So the Mercury finger and mount represents your ability for communication, whether in personal relationships or business. And you can see here in this one, it's quite bulged. You can see that there's a dint there, so it is quite a large amount on this person here. So it shows how well you connect with others, as well as the amount of mental capacity and ideas. So someone, what that means is, big mount here means that they do use their ideas a lot. They are working probably in a business, or they're communicating a lot with other people. So positive aspects show a quick wit and intelligence. Negative aspects, in other words, if it is overly large or flat, either way, they point to deceitfulness or nervousness. Deceitfulness would rather be for the very, very well-developed mount. So if it's huge, then this person could easily deceive people because he's got the ability to communicate in such a manner. And we'll talk more about that when we go to the finger shapes in another lesson. So continuing on with the Mercury, I have here a displaced Mercury, where it's not directly under the pinky there. It's shifted over to half and half under the Apollo finger and half under Mercury. So that is a displaced mount. So if it's partially under the Apollo, the communication aspect will be used creatively, such as a writer. So this displacement usually happens when there's a high Apollo line that rises. There's these lines here. When they come all the way up the top, it tends to divide the mount. So the Mercury finger plays a significant role in the overall balance of character. If it's well developed, it lessens the struggles to succeed in all areas of life. It stands for communications, intellectual capacity, the thought process, learning ability, honesty or dishonesty, sexuality, healing, and diplomacy. So this refers to the finger as well, but we will be talking about the finger more in the next lesson. But for this meaning, somebody with a very flat mount here may struggle with learning. They may not be very sexual, and they might not be diplomatic. So it's overall it's better to have a developed mount there. Moving on to Venus now. Venus mount is at the base of the thumb. It symbolizes beauty, seduction, romance, and love. It also shows the well-being of the individual, indicating how much energy and affection is available. A springy and well-rounded mount is ideal. It shows someone with a friendly and sympathetic and affectionate nature. So if it's very flat, it's a lack of affection and sympathy. So we'll talk about the size of that mount. So depending on the size, it depicts the amount of sexual energy, shows how much physical stamina is available, the capacity for love, not just for others, but for like nature and just for loving things in general, and also music ability. If it is a sharp angle of thumb down here at the bottom, and if there's a loop of music on the skin ridge pattern on the lower section of the mount, it usually means good music ability. But we'll talk about the ridge patterns on another lesson. So the health is judged by the consistency of the mount. If it's going to be soft and squishy, obviously not as much energy there. So the healthy Venus mount of a healthy person should bounce back fairly promptly. When you press on it, it should pop straight back up. If it leaves a dent and the skin doesn't want to come back up, it shows the person may be ill or old or just lacking in energy, not fit. Okay, moving along. The moon mount, which is opposite the Venus mount, opposite the thumb. Right, it represents the mother, the wife, and fertility. It associates with the subconscious, sensitivity, and the emotions. In a man, it still signifies his sensitivity, although it may be repressed. It can symbolize his mother, his wife, or the ideal woman. It refers to imagination and creativity, idealism, the love of travel, empathy, and sensitivity. So this mount, if it's well padded and bounces back when you squish it, that means it's well developed. If it's full of lines and just appears flat, the imagination and creativity is lacking, and then probably don't like to get outdoors much, and probably not very empathic, I don't know how to say that word. Anyway, intuition and memory also come into it. So we have someone with strong instincts and good memory will have a well-padded mount of moon. It shows someone who's nurturing. So this is where it represents the mother and the wife and fertility. So somebody with a well-padded mount will probably be quite fertile, and they'll be nurturing nature. Pluto is just below what we were just talking about. We were talking about the mount of moon, and Pluto is the area just below it. And this area joins the mount of moon and likewise represents the subconscious and imagination. It has a connection to occultism, death, obsessions, and sexual energy. It refers to mystery and intuition, healing power, karmic lessons, anxiety, the love of nature. So if it is well developed, usually it hangs low like this. Can you see how it's lower than the opposite? Mount Venus sits high like this, and this one is sort of drooping down. That means it's well developed. If it wasn't drooping like that, it would be underdeveloped. So this person would have high instinct, intuition. She would be mysterious. She would have powers of healing, but she might also suffer a lot of anxiety, and such as nervousness, depression, things like that. She can be, doesn't mean she's suffering from it, but she's vulnerable to those things. But I definitely. Okay, outer Mars. This is the area above the mount of moon. As you can see by my wiggly drawing, the area of Mars that runs through the center of the palm right across, it shows the strength of character in general. The outer Mars area under the Mercury finger and Mercury mount indicates the amount of moral courage. So not physical courage as in jumping off a cliff, but how much courage do you have to speak up and stand up for people and things like that. It shows energy, aggression, determination, and resistance and survival instincts. So any marks or flat area here obviously shows a lack of those. The person who doesn't have a well-developed mount here would not be very aggressive, and they probably lack energy. So this person does have, this is well developed here because you can see there's no lines there. You can see it's bulging out more than other areas of the pan. So this person is quite aggressive. But it also shows dedication. So they would be dedicated to what they do. Whatever they do, they will be a dedicated person. Now the inner Mars is on the opposite side of that. And we're looking just in the crack where the thumb is. So it's opposite to where the outer Mars was. So the area below the mount of Jupiter and inside the thumb is where we find physical courage and energy. It symbolizes action, boldness, and virility. assertiveness and aggressive, and even violence. So you can see this person, it's not bulging, it's quite flat because the skin is creased and everything. So even though that she may be have some aggression and assertiveness, there's not a violent type person. Often that's well developed in the military and sports people. It stands for temperament and impulsiveness. In other words, temperament, I mean bad-tempered people will have a very well developed inner Mars mount. It also shows someone who loves danger. So they're not afraid, because it's for physical courage. They're not afraid to leap out of a plane or bungee jump or things like that. So these people would love doing dangerous activities. Neptune, here we go down to the bottom of the palm, is the area between the mount of Moon and Venus. Neptune represents inspiration, sentiment, dreams, and psychics, but it has been said to be connected with drug addicts and depression. So it can mean, if it's well developed, that the person may be an addictive personality. It shows a highly developed sense of psychology and awareness, but also perception of ideas, building, and inventions. So whilst Neptune does have some negative aspects, the positive are that the person, the sense of psychology and awareness, what I mean by that is that they sense other people's nature. So this person would make a good psychologist based on the fact that she could sense people's feelings and maybe understand why they do things. So, and as far as building and inventions, because it's between the two mounts, it acts like a bridge. So when this mount is well developed, the individual will often have a love of being near water. That is also true. Whenever I see this, the person has been either a fisherman or loves going out in the ocean. Uranus, this is one that's very, very difficult. Hardly anybody speaks of this. I don't read about it much in the books, and most people do not even notice that that area of the hand is developed. But Uranus is a mount that's controversial. It's been said sometimes to lie between the head and heart line, which is here. That's the head line, that's the heart line. So it's said to lie between them, but that is the plane of Mars. So next to the mount of Jupiter, here, but mostly it's found near the area where the fate line and head line meet. So this is where I believe on most people the Uranus mount is. So it's associated with the higher faculties of the mind, the changes and revolutions and disruptions. It also represents our reaction to existing circumstances, eccentricity, non-conformity, independence, and modern advances in technology. Now, you can't really tell in this photo, but this mount here is developed. This person does have a dint there and a dint there on either side of it, and there is a lump area here. So they're a little bit eccentric. This person's a little bit eccentric, and they do like to do things independently. So very independent and into technology as well. Now we have some examples. Here we are, those Mars mounts. The outer Mars, when it's well developed and free of markings, it's a positive indicator. When the plane of Mars, which is just the middle of the palm, if that's not hollow and it's firm, it's a positive indicator. And the inner Mars, If that's not overdeveloped, it's a positive indicator. Only time it's a positive indicator when the inner Mars is developed is when someone brave is needed, such as someone in the military or a sports person. Okay, so on the other picture, we have the Neptune mount here. A well-developed Neptune mount with no obvious valley between. The two mounts tend to join together and there's not a big groove in the middle. So that means the Neptune mount is developed. So this hand belongs to an actual builder who owns the sea. Here's some more examples. Here's the Venus mount, quite large. You can see how much that is bulging. The mount of Moon and Pluto is also large. The Venus mount on this person shows just how high the libido is on this individual. They are a very friendly person, but they also have a high sex drive. And here's the opposite. We've seen this hand before in the previous lessons. There is strong instincts, nurturing and imaginative. When the mount of Moon, outer Mars and Pluto are all well developed, you can see that whole area is well developed. But on the opposite side, the Venus mount, unlike on the previous photo, this area is very flat. So this person doesn't have a lot of physical energy, probably no sex drive at all. And here is one that seems to be flat all over. Hardly any of these mounts are risen. The whole hand just looks very flat. So that person probably doesn't have a lot of energy in general. They probably have a very quiet life, and they're very sensitive too. You can tell by all those lines all over it. Okay, so bit of a summary now before we finish up. The development of the mounts. We'll start up the top. Mercury mount. If this is flat, it can show a lack of interest in people. If it's large, it shows a friendly person. If it's over large, they're very passionate. So the Apollo, if it's flat, it shows an introverted or shy person. If it's large, they are socially lively and creative. Saturn mount. A flat one shows common sense. A large one shows someone responsible, but over large shows gloominess or solitude. And the Jupiter mount. A flat one shows a lack of confidence. A large one shows ambition and leadership. If it's over large, it shows someone who's quite domineering. They are the ones who like to tell you what to do. And the inner Mars, if it's flat, it shows cowardice or a lack of control. If it's large, it shows courage. If it's over large, it shows aggression. The plane of Mars, if it's hollow, there's lack of character. If it's thick, however, it shows a hot temper. So the outer Mars, flat, shows weakness, and a large one shows strength. Mount of Moon. A flat Mount of Moon shows someone who's unemotional. They're a little bit cold. They don't show their emotions, and they probably don't have many emotional feelings. A large one is the opposite. It shows someone who's very emotional. They probably cry at every single sad movie and things like that. But they're also very nurturing and creative. Down here at Pluto, flat shows someone who's unaware, like lack of instinct, intuition. If it's large, they are imaginative. If it's very large, it shows someone who is very intuitive. The Neptune, if it's flat, it can mean depression. If it's large, it shows someone inspired or intuitive. Uranus, which this person actually is here. I can see that there. So the drawing's not quite higher, but I can see there's a little lump here. So Uranus is actually here. So if that's flat, it shows somebody sluggish. And if it's large, it shows someone who's very innovative. They like to do new things. Venus mount, last of all, if this is flat, it shows a lack of energy. If it's large, it shows a high level of energy. If it's over large, it shows aggression and very strong sex drive. So there we are then. You can go back to any of these and have a read through them again. And hopefully we'll start to get the gist of it. So that concludes lesson 4. If you want to contact me, I'm happy to answer your emails. Just click on this link or email me anytime at sari@destinypalmistry.com. See you later. See you next time.